Boys, hello, this is Time to Collision. Today we'll be casting Greenhorn tournament, 1v1 tournament for newbies with Alnot. Alnot, are you here?
Hello, hello.
Hello, Alnot is the meta caster for this game, so I had the pleasure to invite him for today's session. Let's start from the game number one. The game number one will be Aaron versus Blabbs, and Aaron is playing first Pichote. Do you like the deck?
I would say that initially there's no huge. There's some things that I think is a little bit off, but otherwise I don't think there's any what do you say, grave sins. But there's some things that maybe is like a small thing that I would or two things that maybe mainly I would think is a bit odd. Two, three things.
Okay, what are the things you would adjust?
I think first, it's very leader heavy in this. So I would just, instead of taking the double leader cards, I would just take a normal leader, which you get free of in infantry, in the infantry tab, I think. And because there is another leader card you get, which is 20, it's a bit more pricey at 25, but at least you get free in a single card. And then would maybe go for uh, some other infantry instead. And I think the other one is that he's completely lacking AA in A. So it's all in B, even though he's a Vanguard deck. So I would maybe move one of his two AA cards to A, and also then potentially move have a infantry card in C. And instead, usually what I think is one thing to do is that I think maybe in this it's an exception because your artillery ones are quite expensive. Katyusha I'm not a big fan of, and I think he's using a lot of B air and not so much A air, even though he's a Vanguard.
Yeah, I'm also surprised about small number of aircrafts in A. IL-2M is a good plane. I mean, it's 80 point. It has 4 bombs, usually enough to kill a Tigan in the open or in light forest. It has pretty potent head-on fighter, but yeah, like no other bomber, cluster bombers in B. We'll see what is his matchup, by the way, but usually you like to have some more planes in A with this deck. Also, it's worth noticing that first Polish once it was the most OP or one of the most OP next to third Canadian decks in the game, and third GTC. Currently a bit in the decline because some maybe upgraded version of the deck appeared. Like you can consider 7 mechanized a bit better version if you take out the air. Would you pick like
Yeah.
without any rules? Like you pick any division. Is like first Pehote in your opinion good choice?
Well, I don't know bands, and personally plays very different from me, so I'm not really a big into it. Especially as you say, they used to be very good, but what has happened is that the infantry meta, which they were very good at, has shifted away, and at the same time they've also been quite hit that they had some nerfs to some of their infantry, which was one of the big turning points for them, where they became less popular.
Yeah, I'm also surprised that he didn't pick the third card of T34s in the tank tab. Instead, he went for a leader. We'll see how it works. But this 8 T34s in A could be no joke. Or like with veterans, you could have 6 or
Yeah,
4.
yeah. Pretty much what this deck division is good at is uh, like the infantry tab, which I don't think like it used to be an amazing infantry tab. I think that, as you say, it's been power crept a little bit, so it's not as amazing. It's still a decent infantry tab. So what you have is that you have a bunch of infantry supported by a lot of T34s for very cheap infantry support, and then you have strong air in the mainly in the sense of a lot of IL-2s, which it's pretty. And then you have like the other tools you need to like deal with most situations, which is pretty much the name of the game for this division.
Yep. Strzelcy for first Polish Piechoty has are for 20 points. So it's basically a mix of cheap and expensive infantry. With Strzelcy for 20 points, you have Oddział Karny for 35 points. Do you like Oddział Karny? 20-man squad?
Uh, Not so. I think like usually yes, when you run them, you maybe take one of them, but as you like they're short of getting like double Streltsy instead of one of them. So
Yeah.
I feel currently maybe they're not as good as they used to be at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use one thing also that I think is odd is that he has all of his disheartened infantry in A, but he uses the NKVD troops in B. And usually I would not recommend using NKVD troops at all because they're not a very useful unit. They're very situational and usually they're not worth the investment. It's just better to have uh, more machine guns or other things. One thing that I'm surprised is not taking the flamers, which is pretty much every division, very very few exceptions. If you have a card of flamethrowers, you usually take them in A in some motorbikes or some other fast transport to to take that initial point very early with
Yeah,
some
and we
infantry.
don't see ognomeczniki, so miotacz ognia from support tab. We don't see saperi rocks from infantry tab. Also, about NKVD, I'll just tell that I've seen many people using NKVD, especially if they can have like armored or like armored support transport index like 16th Panzer, so it's basically cheap frontline holder. But that's all. Certainly not
Yes.
the case for first peyote. Okay, so that was first peyote for Aaron. Let's go to Blabbs deck. And Blabbs was playing Mr.
44th.
44th. That's matchup from like half year ago or a year ago. First Polish
Yes, it
against
very much is.
44.
I myself haven't been a fan of 44 much myself. They have seen buffs, seeing how the T3485 has been getting better. Even though the APCR cycling isn't a thing anymore, they still very much are better than they used to be, seeing how their normal AP have been buffed as well. And I think in this much, it's going. They're going to be. I think that the T3485 is actually going to be very central to how much this game might turn out because uh, the, there's going to be a lot of T34s likely, and 85s are great at taking them out. So the question is then if Blabbs can keep those 85s alive, and then he will just chew through the earlier T34s, or but then he needs to defend them from the different air and SU 85s, etc. But if he loses the T35 85s without really getting the value, that will be very tough because one big in this matchup is that you have Vanguard versus balanced, so you have a big income discrepancy. So if you're balanced versus a lot of T34s and lose 85, that's a ouch right there.
First, like what really like showed to my face, like when I just take a look at the snipers in the recon tab. So Blabbs, if you watch this vote, don't bring snipers in slow transport. Like sometimes you can bring them in armored or like fire support transport, but most of the time you want them in jeeps, in the fastest transport possible. And snipers in Zs42, it's a bit weird choice. Why? Because Zs42 is yeah.
I think that it's a mistake because just he didn't really look at the transport because for some reason in Steel Division, often when the SIS2 is an option available, for some reason it defaults to picking that one. So I just think
Hello,
that
Fantex.
he just picked a sniper card and didn't look into the transport because I think that is a common thing you see is when the SIS makes it in, it's someone that didn't look at the transport and just added a card of something.
Yeah, yeah. And you can see that he brought a lot of AA. He was expecting the same thing we were expecting, like a lot of bombers and other IL-2s from first Polish. But we know that he has only one bomber card in A, and Blabbs has already two AA cards in A and two AA in B. Like if he managed to deploy all of this is not going to be penetrable for IL-2s for sure.
Yes, exactly. So, but yeah, that's the question is that it's, as I told you, balance versus Vanguard. So taking an entire income for an AA piece when you're the one under pressure, it's Blabbs really needs to take some good trades and hold his line to be able to afford to build up that AA behind. And otherwise, I think that this deck looks very good. It's just like the changes, like you say, is a transport error. Otherwise, I think it's quite a decent deck. There's just some minor things. I think like you see right here, like the 120 mm mortar is quite uncommon. It's not really often used. Usually use the smaller caliber in A, and the other one I would say is that I think that when you bring 37mm AA pieces, especially when he brings as many as he has, I would usually give them a star, because I think it makes a good difference on those guns, especially if you manage to upgrade it to more stars with just your infantry or your combat, because like what is it, like 6 in B and 3 in A? If you get to B and you run out of those 6 when you have 4 of the 85mm A as well, you're pretty much like you're not going to place out that many AA anyway in almost any, even if it's like a really really long game.
Yeah, and we can see that Blabbs, even though he brought only half of leaders of Aaron, he brings the combat. Aaron doesn't have a combat, so we'll see if he will be able to deploy all of the expensive stuff like combat, AA, artillery, because he has more artillery in the deck, and if he will able to stop the flying IL-2s, because Blabbs is balanced and Aaron is Vanguard.
Yes.
Alright, so let's go to the replay. Replay the map. Mute Games is asking, time to question, is this the first game played? I'm pretty sure it's the first game I found to be played, or the replay. It's Aaron
If you're asking
versus...
if this is a first of like best of 3 or so, yeah, this is their first game. If you're asking if it's the first for the tournament, it might be, yes, but I can't tell for 100% certainty.
Okay, I'll fast forward to the deployment. I hope I don't miss it too much. So what do you think about the map? Do you like the map? Do you think it's balanced?
I think that this is one map I like a bit more. The only downside I see, like this map, well, of course, it's like most map. There is some favoritism on the map, but I think that relative to other maps, it's not as bad that are played, and also. I think that actually more than that, the one thing I don't like about this, while I do like the map in general, the one thing I do not like about it is that it exacerbates the things that are currently meta even more. Because this map is, medium tank Shermans and those kinds of tanks becomes even better like this is one of their favorite. You think it's a lot of infantry because it's a lot of forest, which it is, but also like medium tanks and like armored car support is really really big here, and that's already very very good in the current meta. So I think I think only the downside is that it just increases the efficiency of what is already really good.
Yeah. By the way, in the meantime, the deployment ends on 5 minutes 57 seconds, so we can go just to 6 minutes and then we'll start.
All right.
Alright, so in the meantime, what I think about the map? I think that this map, I would personally favor Aaron MK2. Why? Because this map favors Vanguard deployments. You can grab a lot of easy flags and then fortify. For example, the middle hill, if fortified, is pretty hard to tackle, even if Blabbs has the tank advantage, long armor advantage. Also, there is very little of places you can put your A safe, both safe and in efficient spots, so it has good line of sight. And because of hills and because of forest, usually it's not the case. So for IL-2s, if enemy A doesn't have good line of sight, this is pretty crucial. We know that Aaron doesn't have a lot of bombers in A, but even these 3 IL-2s he has for 80 points, they can give Blabbs a headache.
Yes,
Alright.
I agree very much. So I think it's very much going to be then if, like you say, like he has a lot of those nice infantry, and it's the question. I think one big is that if those 85s that we see, if they manage to hold off, because if they're not dealt with, they can hold off in several areas. This you can somewhat sneak around, but they can hold off pretty well. But that then the Aaron needs to deal with that with his air, because that's very much his main way to dealing with the 85s in this game.
Do you prefer blue or red side? So red side is Aaron and blue is Blabbs.
I think for this map, I would say maybe blue side. I would say maybe. I think this is one of the close one, and maybe I would take a moment extra to think about it. Yeah, because I think that red has more, as you can see, they have more flags that are closer to the front line, while there's more further back for blue. And that's the thing I think is that especially if you look at the third flag, if you want to get the triple tick, there's only 2 blue flags that are close to the front line, while you have like 5 red flags close to the front line. So getting the triple tick as a blue player is much. You need to go much. You don't need to go as deep as a red player would have to do.
Yeah, I agree. How is your timing going? How close you are to 6 minutes?
Yes, I'm ready at 6.
Okay, so 3, 2, 1, let's go.
All right.
Let's take a look about Aaron deployment. Aaron forgot to deploy in the left forest of his, like the left flag. This is like 200 IQ strategy or small mistakes. Am I true? He didn't deploy anything there? Yeah. It looks like. So it will be free flag for the Blabbs from the beginning. We'll see what Aaron will achieve going to the plateau 100%. I'm pretty sure that was an oversight from a new player rather than decision. But we know that he is a Vanguard and he will be attacking guy, and so far it doesn't look like he brings a lot. What's more, Blabbs already attacking in the middle with Ogno Mechnikis.
Yeah, it's just like we said in the deck building. You want that card of Ognos in the very early game to do this. Just push up and steal some early flags, which is exactly what Blabbs is getting here with his Ognos, just because of that extra speed they're getting. While on the other side, we have just normal infantry transport that makes it so that we already have a 14-10 to Blabbs. And this is what you really want if you're against an aggressive deck and you're the more defensive player. Usually, at the start of the game, you're at the same amount of points, even though he gets more for each tick. You both have 750 at the start of the game. So, as the player which has the worst income in the early game, the very first engagement is very important, because if you can get because there you're equal to them. So if you can get a good trade off there, their opponent is going to spend their advantage in just taking back their flags instead of actually forcing you off your flags and falling back and then losing ticks. So I think that's usually one thing that is very important in when Vanguard balanced matchup. In the meantime, we have a lot of fighting is here. As you can see, blue has nice bulge in here of things they get for free, while very focused here in the middle and in the southern area here for Aron.
Yeah, few tips I can give already to Aaron is first, like when you use your tanks, very rarely you want to use fast move. Most of the time you want to use Q move. Why? Because you lost tank engagement even though you had number superiority. Why? Because your tanks were moving, losing any consecutive shot bonus and basically losing accuracy because of being moving themselves. Also, I've seen that you are using M42 AT gun right clicking on enemy tank. Sometimes it works, or when you want to focus fire in open line of sight, but it would be much faster and efficient if you just used C button for line of sight and use Q move, so attack move, to move into position where you can fire from. Because when you right click, sometimes AI pathfinding do weird stuff.
In the meantime, we see a T-3485 going down to just a bunch of overloading of anti-tank rifles, Armata, and it even died there due to HE damage. I think that one thing that, like you said, Aron is, I think that his forces are a bit split, is that in some areas he has very, very lots of infantry, and in one area he has very lots of tanks, but they were in different areas. So two things I would say there. First, then, is that where you want to push, you need to get the side on that point and really force there. Here we see a lot of Aron doesn't have a specific point that he's really trying to push. He has a lot of forces in the very south and also in the city on the hill. But usually you want to really pick one point and really go blasting past your enemy. Because if you pick several, then your advantage gets diluted over the front line, and it also gets easier to defend. So really keeping the focus on one point is very important as a vanguard or offensive player. And the other one I would say then is, as what I started with, is that you want to mix your infantry and tanks, because the tank battalion is that you send is going to have problems with the infantry hiding in forests or not seeing stuff, while your infantry group could now it managed to deal with the 85, but it almost struggled for just a single tank to stop that entire push. But now that the 85 was a bit too far up, he managed to deal with it.
Yep, I agree. Once again, Aaron is using a right-click move instead of a Q move and moving into position on the right with AT gun. This is like small mistakes you can easily fix, so you know there is nothing to worry about. But this AT gun would pay you much more money if you use it that way. What I really like though, if you can see from Aaron, yeah, he's not coordinating timing strikes with different kind of unit like tank, mortars, and so on. But at least he's using all of them. Anyway, we didn't see any plate from him so far.
Yeah, he's going heavy here now, bringing out some Su-76s, using that smoke to get rid of some of the tanks there in the middle, moving up his own Su-76s. Because as we see here, the middle hill is very, very thin. So if those Su-76 gets that T-34, it's pretty. There's some close reinforcements, but there's not much else in this. In the meantime, we see, as I told earlier, this infantry blob further up to the north in the forest are pretty much getting stopped by the T-34, as he doesn't have a mix of tanks. But now we see the Air Force coming in here, and just 50-kilogram bombs won't deal with the T-34, but and now he's losing some air as well. I think here's one other issue, is that if after you bomb, especially if enemy air is about, don't instantly recall your bombers. You want to first send them back to your side close by, and when they're very close to getting out, that's when you recall them. Because
Have you seen this? Have you seen this a lot?
Control.
IL-2 almost killed by Yak-3, killed Yak-3 with rear gunner. Oh my god.
No, I think the plane was too fast, so it flew past the IL-2 and got in the front of the IL-2 and got hammered by the IL-2's weaponry, because the front of IL-2 is not a place you want to be.
I agree. Yeah, so if you take a look about the forest, like you could see that even single T-34 in combination with all of this infantry, when you've got like 2 oddział karny, and by T-34 instead would do much better job. Because right now this T-34 on the hill is just suppressing it for free.
Yeah, he's pushing through this forest here by pure just overwhelming force. But that is the thing, is that those those 3 tanks that are about there, he doesn't have any good ways to deal with it, so he needs something more to bring there, or those will be like big stopping blocks, and really by the time that Blabbs need to really run the clock out until he gets back the advantage.
Alright, but he's not surrendering. Even though the opening wasn't very good for Aaron, he managed to go to 12-12, but he needs 59, or at least positive tick, to start thinking about winning the game. Although if you take a look on the right side, Blabbs is not in the best position. Like, if this Su-76 falls, this SG-43 and Ognomashnikis won't stop whole forces he has there.
Yeah, we really see the power of the Vanguard here. Now, he's been, as we said, he focused on 2 points and really reinforcing them, and that's, we can see them. There wasn't too much of Blabbs in those areas, so they're really getting overwhelmed now, and he's about to lose a big chunk of central area, and he needs to push a little bit forward just to get that. He's closing up on that double tick now, almost, but he needs to get a little bit further in to get that. There's still some things in the way, and those, as I said, those T-34s really are a pain in the ass for Aaron here.
Yep, I think that this AT gun will make short work of this T-34 if it manages to fire, because it's only 1 man left, and T-34 in the trench can easily pin it with 2 machine guns. So, but if you take a look at the map, we could say that Aaron took a lot of ground, but he's still losing the flags. Mainly because he gave up completely the left flank, or he forgot about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's something that you can sometimes do as a strategy to really, as I told you, like really overwhelm. One point is that you give up like an easy flag for your opponent somewhere else to really maximize the points elsewhere. And I think that then you really need to focus your forces somewhere. One thing though that I think that Blabbs is missing an opportunity here is that you have the free flag in this area, and you have like especially the T-3485 that you have in the back on the north here. This is something I think that a lot of players miss, is that really reposition that to another front. Like a lot of people think very much vertically of each of the different like roads or like that is in the map. That that T-35 really could help and support in the middle now to the T-34s that are now whelming in to support Aaron's infantry in the middle.
Yeah, I agree. Also, one mistake from Blabbs is that he has seen by the front line that there is nothing from Aaron at the beginning on the left flank of Aaron and right flank of Blabbs. In my opinion, if you see the opening, if you see basically you feel the blood, you can take one more flag 45 further. So it takes much more time and much more forces from enemy to get his flag back. So for the next time, Blabbs, if you see these mistakes rarely happen. I think this is a newbie mistake, but if you see at any moment that frontline is collapsing, move forward, take more ground, fortify. That's the best thing you can do.
Exactly, because people rarely in this game have layered defense. So if you manage to break through their initial defense and their front line falls so far back, it's usually not barely anything behind there. So that's really when you have your chance to push up, and that's when you can get some, like Aaron is. I'm sorry, Babs is actually doing now, is that even though he's getting pushed out by Aaron's defenses, just by getting these sneaky flags in the very edge of the north and south, he's stopping his points from dropping and taking that timer out. So that's something Aaron needs to do, is that you can't really afford giving those flags away for free. Now he's getting some of them. I think that might just be the weird front line, but you really need to not give away those, because he can see from Aaron as well is that you don't have anything up in front here, and yet you're losing the flag. So Blabbs doesn't have anything close by either. Just send in whatever cheapest frontline pushing unit you have and just get that flag back, and then you can focus on your main push again.
Anyway, I really like from Aaron what he did on the right, that he decided that he has nothing to fight against Su-76, although he has, because he has multiple T-34s Su-76 himself. He just decided, I will go around. Sometimes that's what you should do, and that's a good spirit. That's what I like.
Yeah, exactly. That's especially in this map, and we see the air war going forward. I think that Aaron is slowly actually winning it, even though he's losing maybe a bit more aisles than he should, due to that calling them off as soon as they do their bombing strike. He lost a few fighters there, but those fighters have then in turn being shot down by Aaron's fighters. So, and that's not. Oh wow! The T-3485 just got instantly cracked in the middle. That's one of those huge losses you really can't afford. He's bringing a lot of T-3485s right now, unsupported by infantry, which gives that risk, like you just said, that he gets surrounded. But the T-3485s can be very strong. He just needs to be careful of those Su-76s.
Yeah, they have double the rate of fire and have more than enough penetration to straight up pen T-3485. Not only in close range, but also in the long range. So he needs to be really careful with them.
Yes, and now here, there's the annoying part is that now there's already infantry digging in the forest, so there's not much vision here when these tanks move up. So it's hard to find infantry, and it's risky. So usually what you can try to do is you can try to cut off the infantry by just going past them and cutting them off from the front line, but then you're very much risking getting shot from all kinds of angles.
Yeah, but we were talking that Aaron made a lot of mistakes, but we see power of Vanguard in this map. He is 15-9, even though he lost like 3 flags and 300 points for free in the first 2 minutes, he's still managing to push and slowly kill tanks and support from Blabbs, and another T-34 goes down. I don't really see this T-34 going to mid, succeeding in close combat against T-34s either.
Yeah, there's just a single 76 and 85 left in the middle there, but there's only one 85. So Aaron has really done some great trades when it comes to the tank warfare here. And as I said, like these T-35, 85, keeping them alive has been very important for him to not lose a lot of points when he's already behind on points. But then again, and just like you say, I think that a lot of people say that balanced is the meta and that's the best thing. But I think as we come to Greenhorn Cup, I still think Vanguard is the better play because it, as we can see here, like those additional points, especially if you go up against someone that doesn't have the same kind of, has a very like defensive, like balanced, slow in the start, that those extra points, they're a huge difference. And I think the when at the Greenhorn level, I think that it makes even more difference than it does in other levels, because you haven't just blobbing and just pushing through the enemy line. It's harder to defend against that until you get more a bit more used to the game and its mechanics and how to deal with that kind of push, which
Yep,
is what we see now happening.
and you can see that even though Aaron was taking bad trades, he is Vanguard, so he is able to bring 1 to 2 millimeter artillery. He brought at least 5 planes already. He is slowly building forces. He even brought Katyusha. I think that the game is slowly getting out of hand for the Blabbs. And
Yeah,
we know that he has a lot of AA, and he didn't brought any of them yet, and he doesn't have frontline coverage to afford them either.
yeah, it's just like you say, like AA isn't really a question in this game now, because as we said, you really need to have afford, you can't afford it in the frontline coverage, like you say. And that's, like you said, is that that's why Vanguard is so good, is that just because you can overwhelm the enemy, and even if you do some bad trades, you might take an initial few 2-3 bad trades, but then after that, your overwhelming power in just numbers overwhelms the enemy, so that gives you good trades, and that leaves you so that you have infantry surviving. And then each time he brings in a little bit, you have the more things that you get from income, but not just on top of the more things you get than your opponent, the things that just survive the initial engagement, and that just keeps on adding up on each other, just making the as you can see in this case, the forces on red side just overwhelming and the blue forces now in sheer amounts.
Yeah, Aaron is winning certainly, at least in flags and in the amount of units on the field, but he made a lot of mistakes recently, which I can point out as a tips for the further games. First, I really like to tell it, don't take fights you cannot win. Sometimes it's better to hide, better to dig up and wait for support, reinforcements, or just ambush. Like he lost at least 2 ognomeczniki squads on the right. Drużyna szturmowa, so basically automaciki, rushing Su-76 in the open. I think there was no need to do it. Like he could hide on the edge of the forest and just ambush with AT grenade or any infantry wanting to cross this forest. Also, he had at least 5 tanks. Right now he has only 2 T-34s and 1 Su-76 in the middle, which were idle for at least 5 minutes. When you have units, use them, especially if you see that you killed 3 T-34 85s around the middle area. Go. Most of the time you'll lose like 1 unit to AT gun or any tank hiding, but you know what's there, you know how to react, you can bring bomber, you have number superiority. If you feel the blood, you should push and attack further.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that going then to how, as a balanced player, do you deal with the Vanguard just using all of this power to just push through? One thing is, like we saw happen actually in the early game, is that find where the push isn't happening. Maybe find if you can probe and get some free flags to just decrease the amount of points you're losing elsewhere. And the other one is that you don't need to push back where you're losing all the way at once. Like it's happening currently. He's trying to push he's trying to defend every single point at the same point. So he's investing one tank in one spot, one infantry in another, and one infantry in another, which really dilutes. He really needs to. You really need to commit to one place and invest a lot of points there, hopefully turning the battle there, and then just re-establishing your defense, and then you can go and trying to take back the next area. And be careful. Then I would leave it to how you see the front line going. If you break through and you see the front line acting as there's not much behind, then you really want to keep on pushing until you see enemy resistance. But once you actually start seeing enemy resistance, then I would then try to then go back and then take the other points that you have lost during the game.
All right. Speaking of the airplay, Aaron, I can give you one feedback. Of course, it's not that easy when you are new and when like you're still learning how to micro and you are in heat of battle. But try to turn off Winchester evac and try to not use not order evac order after strike. Why? Because of most of the time it's like perfect moment to evac for enemy fighter to get on your tail. If you have like a bit of micro awareness left, just maneuver a bit and then go straight to your spawn. Usually it saves at least 50% of the time you're playing. This time you weren't punished because you had air superiority and AA, even though AA is a bit too far in the back, like this K2 52K 85mm is very potent AT gun. You could put it on middle hill and not only killing T-34s, killing enemy planes, support infantry, anything which would like to come closer to you.
Yeah, and I think like, so maybe this is a bit late, but the disclaimer. So we're trying to then make this cast a little bit more informative. So don't take it too personal. It's we're trying to help support, and on the other side, I do think that we see one thing that Aron has been done very well is that he's really now, even though it didn't go as well in the very first engagement, once his first ticks came in, he really then when he started sending in reinforcements, as you can see now with the tank train and the infantry train, he's doing the right thing. What you want to do is that you want to send in a significant force at one point at a time. So what he did is that he just used that additional income he had over Blabbs and just funneled it into the middle, and that is where he broke Blabbs and managed to push through. So I think that was good play of him, and that's we're seeing the fruit of that offensive here now. That's how he managed to get so far up and get that 15 double tick. And even now we can see it when he's bringing his infantry. He's really trying to funnel a lot of like significant forces in one area, and I think that's one thing that Aron has been doing well. That is really brought him to the point that he's at this moment here.
Yeah, this game usually has two principles. First, cost effectiveness. That's why like 20 point or 15 point infantry squads are usually the best. And second thing about like concentration of force. And Aron is doing that perfectly because Blabbs, even though he had perfect opening for the balance versus Vanguard on this player, you can see that he's like sending one AT gun here, one tank here, one infantry squad here. And I don't know. Here I'm just buying all my income into single direction and pushing with it. And that's what you should do, because he gains local superiority in numbers, even though he had much less point because of early trades on the field. He was like trading a bit better in this area, then he traded a bit better in the mid, and slowly but surely he got total advantage on the field. And I don't think 4 minutes is enough to get it back, especially that Blabbs lost at least 4 planes so far.
Yeah, we see that now Blabbs, when he's back in his, the income is back in his favor. We see that he's been really halted Aron's push, and he's taking back some things, but as you say, it's going to be very difficult for him to take it back enough in the little time he has left. I think that as the Vanguard player, once you get that 15 and really notice that your push has been stopped, one thing that is important is that you send up your your line holding forces. Like we see here, has a 85mm anti-air very, very far back. It's not going to do much at all. So what you want to do is that AA, and also maybe send up some anti-tank stuff really to the front line where you have now hiding a lot of infantry in these forests. Now it's a bit late, but when you really had that steam. It's I think very good thing to do then is just set in some anti-tank guns and maybe an AA like quite a bit far up and some anti-tank guns in those forests that you've captured, because then you can snipe off a few enemy transports here and there, and that are really going to slow down their advance in taking back those points. But even with that, I think it's going to be look very almost impossible here for Blabbs.
I wanted to say, Aaron, that he is doing risky maneuvers with right-clicking Su-76, like in the right middle, past the hill, with T-34s. But he actually did like perfect combined arms. He used Katyusha to suppress AA, AT, and Su-76, push T-34s, and everything is dead or suppressed, and dead soon. That's perfect. That's actually good.
That was a very good maneuver by him. Really, like he really timed that, setting the Katyusha, which I complained, said it is not that good, but here we really saw it when it's used well, and it was. He pinned down the things, killed some stuff, and now he brings up the follow up afterwards. It's he's missing some infantry. Like he has still a lot of things a bit in the back, but he utilized a lot of that combined arms, as you say.
Yep. And I really like that he didn't expect Katyusha to just straight kill everything in the area. He used it to suppress and T-34s to finish. I want to think that it was everything intentional, because if it was, it's perfect. Perfect example how you should use artillery in this game, in 1v1 at least.
And here we see it, like if your opponent has heavy tanks that you really can't deal with those 34, 85, just send in some bombing planes and make them fall back. You're either buying enough time for them not doing stuff, or over time that HE damage will really deal with it, your problem.
Yeah. A few more things for Aaron, small tips. I see that, Aaron, you are bringing a lot of recon. Try to put recon in a better line of side spots, because at least two of your recon squads are like kinda like in deep forest or behind building, blocking line of sight completely. So this is like a very small tip. And second, I see multiple times that you have a lot of reserves, and in general warfare having reserves is okay, but in Steel Division, in my opinion, reserves are important only in one situation, and this situation is when you are getting off-mapped, and then you rush like 1 or 2 infantry squads to hold the line and stop potential surrender. But in terms of tank combat, usually the more the better.
Exactly. It's just like you say. You usually the main things you have reserves for is those off maps or other nasty things, artillery like that. Otherwise, you really want 100% of your fighting force at the front line, because otherwise you're gonna use 60% of your fighting force, but you're still gonna be up against your opponent's 100% of the fighting force, and then you're really gonna, as we say, just the sheer amount of infantry or tanks or whatever, like quantity is very important. If you have 4 tanks and your opponent has 3 tanks, even if their 3 tanks might be slightly better, having just more is such a big thing. And that's what we saw, how Aaron really broke through the middle. He just had a swarm of like 4 or 5 infantry squads against 1 or 2. So you don't want to spread it out too much. You really want to bulk your force into that to make sure that you have a lot of units fighting a small amount of enemy units.
Well, looking post-match KD, Aaron traded much better, 3 times better, even though he did this reserve thing. I'm not sure if this all was because of cost effectiveness of his unit, because of Vanguard income and making this like concentrated pushes where Blabbs was trying to spread his forces around.
I think 2 points is like you say. One thing is that, well, of course, the Vanguard, especially if it ends up winning, it usually gets quite a snowbally effect, like we saw this game. And the second one is Aaron. I think was like you said the main point. Aaron, he really funneled his forces into pinpoint spots where he tried to push. The very first 750 points, he didn't do that much, which we saw. That's why the early went quite bad for him. Comparatively, but once he actually started calling reinforcements, he really did it at like at the singular spots, bringing in a lot of force in one place, while Blabbs spread it very much out, which caused so Blabbs had he had a little more infantry or a little more units in one area of the map, but they were standing up doing nothing because he wasn't being pushed there. In the meantime, he was extremely overwhelmed in one area. So he had infantry, like he has his forces spread out. A lot of forces not actually partaking in the battle, not being efficient or effective, not doing anything. While then one small part of his force was really having to deal with all of the enemy forces by themselves.
Yeah. Also, this game was perfect example that tank advantage is not necessarily like winning you the game most of the time. Yeah, we mentioned that T-3485 is usually T-34E bully, but in close combat, I've seen T-3485 falling to T-34Es and Su-76M. So Cell is really tough. In my opinion, Cell is really tough match for T-3485. Why? Because it has very small rate of fire. It's not that fast tank itself. He gambled and it didn't really work. So
And as we saw, when it came to tank warfare, it wasn't down to the 85s. It was actually the SC-76s, almost on both sides, that really were the one really dealing the punches.
yeah, if you see the Levkovich Su-76M on Aaron's side, he killed 3 T-34 76s and 3 T-34 85s. Oof. Oh man.
Yeah.
This guy got a medal after this match.
Those Odis Al-Qarni, those like those 20-man squads, they were doing work as well. Like several of them were getting multiple squads, each one of them.
Yeah, because they are pretty bulky, and I think from both players, certain units in this game, especially from infantry, are dedicated to certain areas of the map. Like you can see a lot of Saperis losing to Oddział, so basically Strafnikis. Why? Because they are fighting on the edges of the forest or in the open. Saperis in the forest would decimate Oddział, especially that they are disheartened. But if you shoot from forest to another forest, for sure Oddział will win because they have more weapons and they have more people in the squad.
Exactly. Auron was more able to dictate where the fight happens, and when you do that, you make sure that your units are fighting where they want to fight, your enemies at the place that they don't want to fight.
Alright, so this was the game number 1, and we are going